The next chapter on the monetary system is a little bit more complicated, and it's really the main reason that I decided to make this video, because if you missed that class, and even if you read the book, and I again hope you will, and even if you look at the slides, and I hope you will, it's still going to be pretty easy to get confused, because we're really moving into a theory that, while I think it's very important, very powerful, and it provides a good explanation, it's a little bit counterintuitive. And the counterintuitive thing is that it has to do with that money doesn't really exist in terms of being a real thing. One of the students, a couple of students on Monday said that last week I had said that money can buy happiness, and maybe I did say that. I hope I didn't, because I didn't mean it. What I thought I said and what I wanted to say was that the gross domestic product, which we do measure in dollars and in terms of in dollars, and although we'll deflate it to make them real dollars, and then we can compare the size of the economy of one country versus the size of the economy for another country, and we're going to use dollars to measure that. And then we might divide by the population, so we can think of gross domestic product per person, and then we can compare one country to another or one point in time to another. And at that point, I would argue that, yes, having a higher standard of living can lead to many of the things that we associate with happiness. So, for example, somebody argued that, well, the gross domestic product doesn't measure the quality of a nation's poetry. And I would say that, well, if you have to have a high enough standard of living that you can afford to have poets who are able to create that poetry. Because if you're just subsistence and everybody is just barely starving and having to work, hours and hours and hours every day just to grow enough food to feed themselves, they're not going to have a whole lot of time left over for poetry. Again, gross domestic product doesn't necessarily tell us how much love a parent has for a child, but a higher standard of living allows us to have good schools and higher education levels, and those are clearly correlated with a higher standard of living. Or even the fact that a parent doesn't necessarily have to work 14 hours a day, but can perhaps support a family on 8 or 10 hours a day of work, and that leaves more time for them to spend with their children and in parenting time. So while money does not buy happiness, having a higher standard of living allows for many of the things that we associate with happiness. But the standard of living isn't because of money. The standard of living has to do with production. Remember, real gross domestic product is a measure of production. And production has to do with the goods and services that the economy is able to produce. We measure that in money, but it isn't the money that allows for the schools or the poetry or even the excess time after a day's work in order to take care of parenting needs. It's the fact that the economy itself is able to produce all of these valuable goods and services, which we do measure in money. So now let's really get into to talk about money. What is money? You can look at that piece of paper you can get in your wallet. I have a wallet, and I have some money in it, and some currency, as you will. And this is a dollar bill, and it's when people think about money, they think about this piece of paper. Well, this piece of paper, if it didn't have this green ink on it and everything else, would be completely worthless. It'd just be worth like the scrap paper from these notes that I'm going to be done with at the end of this lecture. I'm going to just put them in the trash can. I'm not going to put that dollar bill in the trash can, though. Why is that piece of paper valuable to me? It's valuable because somebody else is willing to accept it to give me something else that I might want, a good or a service that I might want. Money is the assets, something that you own, that people use to buy goods and services. We say that money in macroeconomics, and quite frankly anywhere in the world, money is defined by its functions, what it can do, not by what it is. It is not because it's green, it's not because it's paper or a coin, it's because of what it can do. And what can money do? Money is a medium of exchange. It is accepted universally for goods and services. And if we didn't have money, we would have to be in a system of barter. And that would be extremely inconvenient and very difficult, and it would really lead to a weak, less economic growth, less trade. There'd be fewer gains from trade, because for me to be able to sell my services as an economics teacher in exchange for pizza, which I love to eat, I would have to find a pizza place that was willing to, that needed an economics lesson and was willing to trade a pizza for an economics lesson. Instead, because of money, you pay money to tuition, some of that tuition goes into my salary, and then I can use that salary to buy a pizza. And I don't have to find a pizza place that needs an economics lesson. So money is a medium of exchange. It is also a unit of account. So we can use dollars to decide that this eraser is worth less than a house. Why? We convert. Instead of thinking about the number of erasers in a house, we can just say, this eraser costs $2.95 and a house costs $150,000, and we can compare. We can compare the value of items using money, and that's kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about the standard of living. That it's not that one country has more money than another. It's that we're using money as a unit of account to decide which country is bigger or smaller, which country has a higher standard of living or lower. And finally, money is a store of value. So it is a way for us to be able to say, borrow money and pay it back in the future. I can do the work today and I don't get paid till next week, and that's okay. It allows for transactions to happen over time. So money is a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. And anything that meets all three of those criteria is money, and anything that doesn't have all three is not money. For example, the Empire State Building, if you happen to own it, that is clearly a store of value. But it is not a medium of exchange. It's very difficult to buy something with the Empire State Building. It's not really a unit of account either, because it's hard to think about how many Empire State Buildings would it take to say, buy the state of Arizona or something like that. It's easier to just think about putting how much is the Empire State Building worth in terms of dollars. How much would all of the land in the entire state of Arizona be worth in terms of dollars? In the history of time, there have been basically two kinds of money. There's been commodity money, which is something that has an intrinsic value. Gold has been used as money in many societies. Other things like rice, even cigarettes in different societies and different places have been used as money. Today, the U.S. dollar is not commodity money, it's what's called fiat money. Fiat is an order given by a government, or really by anybody, but in this case it's by the government. It is money because the government says it's money. And in fact, if you look on that dollar bill that I held up, it says, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private." And it is legal tender just because the government says that it is. There is no intrinsic value in that piece of paper at all. How much money is there in the economy? Well, we measure, there are two different measures of money that we're going to use. One is called M1 and one is called M2. It's just arbitrary 1 and 2. So M1 is all the currency that's in circulation plus demand deposits, which is deposits at banks that you can access either through a checking account or a debit card. And then when you add in some of the savings accounts, that gets to M2. And you can look at the slides, you can look at the book and see sort of the more technical definitions. But basically M1 is currency plus demand deposits, and then M2 is M1 plus savings deposits. This is the key for the quiz on Monday, liquidity. The word liquidity. In fact, I'll even write it up here on the board. Liquidity is going to be one of the magic L words. There are going to be two. So I'm going to have a quiz question on Monday. What are the two magic L words? So the first one is liquidity. Liquidity is how easily an asset can be converted into the medium of exchange. So we talked about the Empire State Building. The Empire State Building is clearly an asset. Somebody owns it. But for them to convert it to money, to a medium of exchange, take a lot of lawyers, take a lot of, they're going to find someone who's going to buy it, blah, 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 blah. It'll take quite a bit of time. It is clearly an asset, but it's not what we call a liquid asset. On the other hand, if you own stock in, say, Apple or IBM or any corporation at all, it's not money because you can't walk in with a stock certificate for IBM and buy something at the co-op or, Walmart or something. On the other hand, if you called your broker or even went on your smartphone and E-Trade or something like that, you could sell your IBM stock, or you could sell your Apple stock pretty quick, and within maybe a few hours or certainly within a few days, the proceeds of that sale would be in your checking account, and you could easily access that through your checking or your debit card. You could use it at Walmart or anywhere else, or Amazon.com or anywhere else in the world. And so like a stock certificate would be considered a liquid asset because it's easily sold and easily converted to the medium of exchange, while other assets, and real estate is a classic example, would not be liquid because of the difficulty and just the time that it would take to convert that into money.